Okay. So we are going to, I think, build on the conversation we started on the study, and you're going to, Anton, introduce yourself in a minute, and we're going to dig into the practice and excellence in practice. So I won't say more because I think you're going to introduce the discussion yourself. So welcome our next panelist to the stage.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Hopefully this will be working if the tech works, and it does. Splendid. Excellent. Great to be here, and thank you very much to our first panelists. They've really set the scene, and again, I've been lucky enough to look at the paper end to end, and it's a really good read, so I strongly recommend it. In a country that produces some of the best baklava in the world, the saying that the sweetest for the end, or nashlaya zakray, is, I think, going to be tested with this panel. So the sweetest for the last. So firstly, a very warm welcome to the fourth panel, where we're going to focus on counselling excellence and partnerships. These are a couple of the strands that we looked at on the paper. So what is the secret sauce for recruiting, for developing, for training, retaining our counselling staff to work in the new partnerships and the new ecosystems that are emerging? And what does that mean? Well, that means different levels of government. That means working with different types of organizations. And it means working across different sectors, so health, education, and skills. These are the new challenges that the pairs face. And they need that if they want to deliver a Rolls-Royce service. We heard a lot about the challenges. Tristan mentioned them in particular. For me, the biggest challenge is that Gen Z is spending too much time on their mobiles and not having enough babies, because demography is arguably one of the biggest challenges that we face, aging populations in particular. We've got, of course, a rapid technological change, skill shortages. The challenges are huge. We've also heard about a number of the solutions, but what I'd like to do is just to look at this from a slightly different perspective. And the key perspective for this panel will be that the EU targets are driving a lot of the change in the behaviors. So the EU target to reach a 78% employment rate target is absolutely crucial, because that means that public employment services need to look outside their traditional cohorts of people. They need to look at inactive people. They need to look at barriered people in particular. And of course, these services are being underpinned by AI and digital tools, which hold considerable challenges, as we've heard, but also some amazing opportunities to create new ways to diagnose, new ways to co-create, new ways to create pathways. I think also it's important for us to look at a slightly different perspective and a wider perspective, and that perspective is that too often we look at these things in silos. So education, skills, employment. I think we also need to look at this in the context of organizational change and change management. So organizational change, changing processes, systems, but also change management, how we bring our counselling staff with us. And again, the paper touched on that, I think, really very clearly there. The fact is that 80% of transformations, including transformations in public and private sector, fail. They fail because there's a lack of leadership, that there's particularly for staff are not engaged and bought on that change journey. So I think this is certainly crucial. So we're going to see this through three different perspectives from Bosnia and Herzegovina. How that is harnessing EU accession funds to build strong foundations towards convergence rather with EU labour markets, so modernising its pairs, looking at reducing skills gaps by improving education and vet, and crucially improving the skills and the capacity of its counsellors. From our colleague from Spain, we're going to be looking at showcasing counselling excellence and partnerships through the lens of decentralization. So how the Spanish Public Employment Service, SEPE, is building a common framework to build more holistic services, and again, how they are harnessing the power of the counsellors themselves to improve training and to improve future-proofing the training itself. And last but not least, we're going to look at the perspective from a supply chain partner to PES. How does he recruit, train, and develop the right talent, both for heart and algorithm, so both people and technology, in order to build effective ecosystems and in order to develop the right kind of services linking skills, health, and other areas of work. So without further ado, I would like to ask Marc Hanke to the floor. Marc is CEO for Ingeus Germany and Switzerland, which is part of a global workforce development solutions organization. Marc has been with the organization for 20 years, so since its inception, and he specializes, along with his partners and stakeholders, in developing new systems and approaches, in particular co-designing, piloting, evaluating, and scaling up projects and programs for people who are facing particular difficulties in the labor market, in particular lone parents, refugees from the Middle East and from Ukraine as well. Marc is a big believer in skills first for developing his coaching talent, and is particularly pleased at having recruited and trained refugees from the Middle East and Ukraine to support fellow refugees. Marc, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Many thanks, Anton, and many thanks for having me. Thanks especially to WAPES and for the PES of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it's a great pleasure to be here, and what value can I add? So I'm part of a global provider of the wider ecosystem, operating since up to 30 years in 11 countries. So I think we have quite some nuggets to share with you. And Anton missed the most difficult client group, which is single men with academic background still living with their mama at home. That's the really most difficult client group we had. So for us, it's about heart and algorithm. How do we bring the best of the both worlds together? Because I think you need the technology aspect. If you like it or not, there is just no choice. You have to include it. Because very conservative guesses think that 27% of all current jobs will be erased by AI. And the more pessimistic ones say even 80% of the current jobs will be no longer here in the next 10 years. And especially people like myself, white collar, or you guys, we are the most threatened. And what we had again, where the repetitive part of the work is quite massive. So what can we do to bring algorithm and hard emotional intelligence and technological intelligence together? And we live in a really complex world, and I will not again tell you about all the risks, because I'm German. I can speak the whole day about risk management, you know, and framework and mitigations. But of course, these risks are there, and the question is how we can reduce all these risks to get the best for our clients, because that's the common thread why we are all here. We want our clients to start working, to stay in work, and to be trained to be able to stay in work the next years. And when they fall out of work, to get them back into work again. So what we had before is, for me, the most important stuff in the session, that we need a close collaboration with the counselors, regardless if it's from your side, from the peer side, or from our side as the wider ecosystem, and employers and the clients themselves, because it's such a complex ecosystem. So, and what we try to do is getting people the opportunity to just survive in this world. And maybe it's a good analogy here in Sarajevo, because when you read about Sarajevo or you ask the KI, what is Sarajevo? You will have a lot of painful things. You read a lot of war, a lot of suffering, a lot of genocide, and many, many invaders coming here. But if you go out and just you leave the plane, and it's my first time here in Sarajevo, you immediately feel the big heart of this population and of this culture. And it's a complete different view that you get when you just trust KI when you ask, when you just feel it, and you feel it yourself by just being here. And that's very often with our clients. If you look at our clients, they seem so full of obstacles, so complicated, so full of suffering. And you look at the CV and you think they will never find a job. But then you talk to them, you listen to them, and then you see the most beautiful flowers are crowding in mud and they are blossoming because they had all this suffering. And maybe Sarajevo is such a beautiful city as our clients are so beautiful because there was so much suffering in the last decades, years, whatever. So the question is, how do we bring all this together? And we mainly, when we talk about our counselors, we look for a good mindset and the right values. So integrity, truth, teamwork, the ability to cooperate, and communication skills are really, really the key for it. Because AI can do one part, but the real work, and we had it in the scientific overviews as well, is done by people. And there the heart intelligence is needed. So, and what is communication? Communication is, first of all, what do you think? Make an educated guess. What's one of the most or the biggest secret of a long-standing marriage or a long-standing friendship? What do you guess? What is it? Communication. And it's simple. Talk to each other. And for the male colleagues, not just talk, but listen at the same time. So we need talking, listening. Otherwise, we cannot work together with our clients, and we will find not the right solutions. And we need a strong ability to change, because without change, nothing will happen. We need to change every day. Like 10 years ago, a car was produced, it was running for 10 years. Then a car was running for 5 years until the next model. And now the Chinese cars are running for 1 year and the next model is coming. And the same is with us. We have to change through the technology day by day by day. And if we don't do it, it will be very difficult. And the same is with our counselors. They need to change, and they need a strong growth mindset and need the willingness to adapt every day, literally. So we prefer diversity and lived experience, and we think if we bring this to the table, the outcomes will be most sustainable. For example, in the UK, where we are in the justice sector, reintegrating former people who had been sentenced into normal life, into the labor market, we have 20% of counselors with lived experience. So lived experience is a positive British way of saying they had been sentenced themselves. And they are really good counselors, true to that. And same with Ukrainian refugees. We have thousands of Ukrainian refugees in Germany, and we reintegrate them not only into the German society, but into the German labor market. And more than half of our counselors are Ukrainian refugees or Russian or Ukrainian speakers themselves, because they really understand the challenges and where these people are coming from. Much better than a person who just speaks German or just lived in Germany. So it's a lot about cross-disciplinary supply chain ecosystems where we need a seamless cooperation with everyone, your colleagues and the private sector colleagues. And that's the most important discussion. And the third party, which is as well really important, are employers. Without employers, it will not happen, especially not now, where especially the European labor markets are under extreme pressure. Since half a year, the German labor market is literally dead. It's just dead. So you need employers in your boat just to have the opportunity to integrate these people. So what we have often is specialists in our teams just getting the vacancies in, and not just the one you see in the newspaper, because 80% of them are dead too, but the hidden labor market. So we need to tackle the hidden labor market to get vacancies that are really alive and which allows us to integrate people into the labor market. So our coaches need to think not just bringing people into work, that's sometimes an easier job, but keeping them into work and upskilling them when they are in work. So that's why the position is so complex, and we have, together with social workers, police officers and firemen, one of the highest burnout risk rates for counselors, because you have so many vulnerabilities every day when you talk to these people and counsel. So you need a lot about well-being around your teams. So we have an EAP system running, we have peers, we have groups where they talk about their difficult cases, because, you know, we have everything human experience brings with us. And with the Ukrainian refugees, we have a lot of women where their men are in war, they lost a child, they had been raped, and you counseling it every day, and you hear these stories. And you just need a way that you can properly live with it when you go home and close the door. So what we do, we foster a co-design to get really a common performance management, a holistic view. So Germany and Switzerland, as I said, we work a lot with Arabian-speaking refugees. We started 2015 with the Syrian refugees and refugees from Afghanistan. And now since 22, 23, we started with the Ukrainian refugees. And quite successful. And Australia and Canada, we upskill local NGOs or not-for-profit organizations where we set the quality framework or the performance management framework or the contractual framework, and the services itself are delivered by these NGOs or really small associations on a really city or municipality level. So the coaches are trained to become navigators, coordinators, integrators, so it's really, really a massive scale of responsibilities they have. And that's maybe the reason why they stay on average 3 or 4 years before they change into another occupation, because it's so challenging. So we have to deliver services taking AI into account, using AI, because without it will not be working, but at the same time always use our human heart intelligence, because that's what's making the difference. And that's what will be delivering the good outcomes. And we need to give our staff the chance to move, to have mobility in the company, to go to other countries, to get promoted, whatever, but to keep them in a way of motivated when they are willing to move and adapt. So in the UK, we have change champions. We use a continuous improvement agency. We use Six Sigma techniques and quite some other stuff. So if we put it all together, the best way, I think the future is for PACE counselors and companies, if you take it all from the early beginning, from the childhood over education, school, starting of the working life and active age, and you are able to serve it all from one hand with different partners, because the challenges will be more and more. They start early and they continue at every step. Autism is a big topic today for young people, or just to be able to work at all, or just to be able to go out of the house. And then they should work, and then they should stay in work, and then they should be open that they are able to work really long. In Germany, we need to work now until 67, in some years until 70. So that's quite long. For us, it might be possible, but if you're a handicraftsman and you have to work until you're 70, might be quite a big challenge. So we will use data, we will foster cooperation, and the crucial message I have, really connect your PACE colleagues to all the other colleagues. When they have a good relationship, a trustful relationship, then it will work. And you might know the cartoon with change. The first question is, who wants change? Who wants change? Raise your hand. Who wants change? And the second question is, who wants to change? And then everybody does like, yeah? So the main point in leadership and developing and keeping talent is, how can we really take people to a place where they embrace change and not just go away when you talk about change, because there's so much change. And what we try with AI is to develop agents that every counselor can use his AI agents just to make his or her work more easily. And these agents change too, quite rapidly. Every 4 weeks you get a new software. So these were mainly my points. Many, many thanks, and questions we do later after my two lovely colleagues.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Marc. And what I get there is the complexity of modern ecosystems, hugely, hugely complex, and that really is one of the key tasks now of workforce development, linking those different sectors and organizations together. I'd like to welcome to the stage Gabriela, please. Gabriela. And Gabriela Álvarez Roosvall is working currently in an important role in communications in SEPE, which is the Spanish Public Employment Service. Her roots, interestingly, are in social work and translation. She speaks 4 languages that she admits to, I suspect many more. She's held a number of roles in public sector, both for the Spanish government, working at the Spanish Embassy in Canada, for example, Temporary Immigration Reception Center in Melilla, that's the Spanish territory in North Africa, and in the Swedish public administration as well. So that's quite a remarkable change. And she's going to talk to us about the work that SEPE is driving now to look at creating common frameworks, common training across a very, very decentralized country. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anton, for your lovely introduction. Thanks, Marc, as well, for this inspiring presentation. Thanks to all WAPES members and guests. Also want to say hi to our online public beyond borders. So I'm very honored to be here today and guide you through, briefly, guide you through the journey of the Spanish national employment system to meet the challenges of the 21st century's labor market. A journey that involves bringing offices together, bringing different levels of government together. And I will introduce to you the network of centers for guidance in employment, where we aim to collaborate to meet the needs of the pairs counsellors throughout the whole territory. So let's see. First, I need to talk about Spain and its unique geographical features. We've got a very decentralized state model where we have 17 autonomous communities and 2 autonomous cities that happen to be in the northern part of Africa. So we have a complex system in place that aims to balance the powers of the central state and that of the regional governments. So when it comes to employment and labor legislation, this competes the state, and the regions have their own employment plans within the state regulatory framework. Now, the regions are also mainly responsible for the active labor market policies within their scope, of course. Now, this model brings services much closer to the citizens' local needs, but at the same time, we must bear in mind the risk for fragmentation and the need to set national standards. So in order to do this, we do have a common framework for action, which is provided by the Employment Law of 2023. This law has consolidated the progress already made towards decentralization and introduced improvements aimed at establishing a more effective coordination between administrations. The law provides continuity to these governance, very important governance bodies of the national employment system, where we have the Sectoral Conference of Employment and Labor Affairs. In this collaboration body, state and autonomous communities make the important agreements about budget and so on. And then we have another body, which is the General Council of the National Employment System, where also the social agents are involved, which is more advisory in nature. And then we have these governance instruments of the national employment system that the employment law does reinforce as well, which are the Spanish strategy for active employment support, which is a 4-year period strategy, and then the annual plan for the promotion of decent employment, which draws annually from that strategy, and the integrated public information system of the employment services. Now, an introduction, a new feature that the law of 2023 brought in was the common portfolio of guaranteed services of the national employment system. Now, this applies, as said, to all territories, and it's an innovation in this law. And another thing that the employment law reinforces is this technical support in the governance scheme that the network of centers for guidance in employment also provides. So here we are, the COE network, as we like to call it as an abbreviation. COE stands for Centers for Guidance, Entrepreneurship, Support, and Innovation in Employment. Now, each region, on a voluntary basis, has created its own COE, its own Center for Guidance, starting in 2022 and completed the full creation of the 20 centers in 2024. 20 centers, we have 17 autonomous communities, 17 centers, 2 from the autonomous cities, and then the state center, that's where I belong. So as you see here, the name itself talks for it. Those are spaces for innovation, where we try to provide super-regional support and strengthen the design, development, and evaluation of public policies, reinforcing also technical collaboration and specialized support in diverse areas. Now, what do we do at the COE network? What are our functions? Bearing in mind the legal framework, we have assignments. We have specific assignments that both the Spanish strategy for employment and the common portfolio of guaranteed services have assigned the COE network. So in order to fulfill this, we have several areas where we work. The design of innovative actions and experimental projects is an umbrella term, I would say. Then we have the training of the SNE employees, of the PES employees, to improve their skills. It's a very important area. We also monitor and support specific projects related to entrepreneurship and social employment. We also try to improve the social dialogue with the social council that each center has, and are also the platform for the whole system to share best practices. Now, if we go into how we try our best, how we contribute to bring excellence to the orientation field, here we have this continuous professional training plan of the national employment system. Now, this is a two-led system where the regions have their own training plans within their scope, and then the state, SEPE, has another plan, the national plan, where we really want to bring specialized training that helps professionalize the service of counseling throughout all territories. Now, the plan is a 4-year plan that is encompassed with the period of the strategy, but then we have annual plans that try to bring the needs of every year to like revise those needs. And there are 9 professional development areas, as you see here, that also are prioritized year by year. Yes, so what do we do in the annual training plan? In organizing this plan, we have sought to give a central role to the staff receiving the training by involving them in the process of identifying their development needs. So that way, we want to increase counselors' ownership in their own learning journey. You see here a diagram with the steps we take in this assessment, but well, basically we do working groups that are conformed by both staff from the Centers for Guidance themselves and from other PES staff that are in contact with a public. What do we aim with this? The expected outcomes of this, that we will have professional training courses that will be more aligned with the actual needs of counselors and have greater participation and satisfaction from those who receive the training. Then, if we go back to the challenge of having national standards in a very decentralized environment, we also have this task of creating models that really put services for all the citizens in all territories at the same level. So we have 2 models that are now being worked by the whole network. The process is in the new model in Employment Council and the one towards a comprehensive entrepreneurship advisory service. So basically in the model of in Employment Counseling, we're moving towards a common profiling system with clearly defined routines, with the objective of establishing minimum standards across the entire territory when developing tailored employment pathways. In the model for a comprehensive entrepreneurship advisory service, the ultimate goal is to offer cutting-edge counseling service for entrepreneurship and self-employment in all territories. And a technical guide will serve as a support tool for counselors from day one. And the idea is to always have permanent updates where we shall reflect legislative, social, and digital changes. So, lastly, to successfully navigate this journey to meet the challenges of this shifting labor market, we must also look beyond the public employment service alone and build also alliances across a broader ecosystem, innovating towards a more holistic system. So through the state centers, the RedCOE webinars, which we call Innovative Solutions, we are actively aligning these market needs with the diverse actors that are driving the employment guidance. Now, this collaborative approach ensures that the core network will deliver on its core promise to foster innovation, to directly address labor market realities, to support our counselors, and ultimately contribute to the fundamental goal of building a more inclusive society. And that was all from me. Thank you very much.
Gabriela, thank you very much. It's fabulous. Thank you. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, of course, we see, or have seen in Europe over the last 20 years, a number of public employment services decentralizing. More recently, Finland, for example, even in the UK, there's a push to decentralize and evolve. And it's right that the service is delivered close to the citizen, but that comes with some really big risks of fragmentation and postcode or zip code lotteries for the quality of service. And I think there are some lessons for Bosnia and Herzegovina here from Spain in particular as well, marrying together some of the regional and governance issues there. Last but not least, may I introduce you to Ljiljana Pandzic, who we're very, very lucky to have here today. Ljiljana has over 20 years experience. I hope that doesn't age you, but 20 years experience is pretty good going in program and project management, and is currently the program manager for employment at the EU delegation to Bosnia and Herzegovina. She leads on transforming the labour market, so the infrastructure and human capital reforms, leading to the EU accession pathway. So again, the important driver of the EU in creating the right conditions for these reforms. Her portfolio includes over 50 million euros in EU-funded projects spanning socio-economic development, employment, and transnational mobility. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anton. Good morning, and thank you for inviting us to address at this conference. I'm DG NS staff. It is Director General for the Enlargement and Eastern Neighborhood. So I'm not going to repeat the structural labor market issues that we have in this country because other colleagues have mentioned them in their yesterday presentations. But rest assured that complexity does not end with these issues. I would like to shed here a little bit of light of the complexity of the sector in light of the accession perspective of this country. So basically the main policy areas, as we call it the acquis communautaire, which is relevant for labor market, is Chapter 19 on social policy and employment and Chapter 2 on free movement of workers. It is not where the story ends because these chapters are cross-cutting with additional 4 sectors. Chapter 20 on enterprise and industrial policy, Chapter 18 on statistics, Chapter 23 judiciary and fundamental rights, and Chapter 26, of course, education and culture. There has been some progress in country in terms of the accession process. However, still there are major steps to be taken. First of all, in aligning the legislative framework with the EU acquis, then implementing reforms and strengthening capacities of the public employment services, increasement of employment and improvement of labor mobility, social dialogue, etc. So the next, maybe what would be interesting for you is to see what actually EU does in this country. This country's European path is fundamentally linked to the implementation of the reforms which have to improve the life of the citizens. In that context, of course, employment and social policies are crucial to these processes. So what we do, we are using the instrument for pre-accession assistance and other financial mechanisms to support necessary reforms in country. Our support is multifaceted, so I have here divided into the 3 main pillars for the sake of this conference. The first one is the modernization of the public employment services. Of course, what we do here, it is like what other colleagues have mentioned, capacity building in terms of the proper trainings to be delivered to the passive staff, methodology upgrades, the methodologies for labor market research and evaluation. Why is this crucial for us? It is because of the fragmented institutions and because we operate in a highly decentralized environment in the country, and individual counseling. Of course, to equip the trainings focused on helping counselors provide customized support to the clients. The second pillar would be increasing access to active labor market programs by building ecosystem and cross-sectoral partnerships. And then the third sector, the pillar leans on logically, which is transformation of skills. Modernization of passes. Maybe it would be good to highlight, like here under this transformational blueprint for the country, we really did not expect any quantum leaps because this is not that type of field. we actually expected only the steady progress in the transformation of the institutions from the traditional way of doing business to the more client-oriented services, which is actually taking the place. Of course, it takes years, but it is a never everlasting change. So what we do, I've here, selected a few projects and programs that we deliver to the country. The first one is the classical technical assistance, purely technical assistance project, which was aimed at strengthening capacity of labor market institutions. You see at the slide what type of services we have provided, but the one thing that I would like to single out is this operationalization of systems for monitoring and evaluating labor market needs. And the result of this assistance, there was a harmonized labor market research methodology, which was adopted and is still in use. This is very, again, important for us because this really streamlines further reporting, monitoring, and evaluation toward the European Commission at the later stages, and we are very happy with this. Of course, traditionally, trainings for the staff of the labor market institutions based on their institutional needs, and improving exchange of information on the labor force supply and demand in context of cooperation with employers and the role of the EU RES network in the process. So here are additional several programs which we are implementing in country in cooperation with colleagues from the International Labour Organization and also with support from the EU Public Employment Services. One of them is EU support to local employment partnerships. Or maybe it is just good to mention that under all of these programs, we have the grant component and technical assistance component. So we are here going to focus only on technical assistance. What we actually provided under this pillar is like improvement of the active labor market programs. Yes, in terms of this provision of proper methodologies for the evaluation. We hope, these methodologies would be embedded in institutions and they will make their life easier in future. Addressing labor market shortages by providing web scrapping tools for past counsellors and methodology for the labor shortage index. Under another program, EU for Employment in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are providing these capacity building trainings and workshops, like peer learning workshops, activation and outreach, motivational support, change ownership, workability assessment, especially focused on persons with disabilities, because this is the program which is targeting particularly youth, women from rural areas, and vulnerable groups like persons with disabilities, Roma, hard-to-employ categories. Further training modules on improving their capacities, but what I would like to single out here is actually crucial for us is this activation, outreach, and motivational support. Why is that? It's because the primary objective of all the EU programs is activation of the dormant labor force in country. And one more thing that I would like to specify, which we are doing under the EU for Employment, is the minimum service and program delivery standards, which have been developed, and we hope that they are going to be embedded into the institutional operations. So this is going to be continued under the EU for Employment, Harnessing Green and Digital Transitions program. So the second pillar that I focused is increasing access to the active labor market programs by building ecosystem and cross-sectoral partnership. We really have excellent results in building the ecosystem and the cross-sectoral partnerships, and how we did it. First, through the EU support to local employment partnerships. This is where our grant assistance takes stage. So we've actually established local employment partnerships who are multi-stakeholder platforms bringing together public employment services, local authorities, education and training providers, private sector and business support organizations, as well as civil society organizations. We've established 26 local employment partnerships, which encompass over 50 local communities across the country. What has been done was actually accreditation of adult education providers, whereas In the end, the results of these certification processes are embedded into these educational and training providing institutions, and they will be also used for the high school pupils. Also, what we are working on is improvement of cooperation with employers association, and one maybe good to mention is the research on employers' perception of the active labor market programs, the best services. EU for Employment, who also functions based on the partnerships where we established 16 employment support intervention extending services to people with multiple barriers to labor market. Each intervention also includes all of these partners. Later, we will have an implementation now, the grants for EU for Employment, harnessing the green and digital transitions with focus on green and digital jobs. And this is where we are going to extend these partnerships to the green and digital sectors. And the last but not least, transformation of skills. Just an example of how we did it and what was done, what was introduced through each local employment partnership, at least 2 vocational training programs for hard-to-employ job seekers registered at PESIS, certification of training programs, delivery of vocational trainings, provision of entrepreneurship training and support to business registration. This is specifically very interesting because we've seen that in delivery of the active labor market measures, the clients, actually the unemployed, are more and more interested in self-employment measure, especially women, youth, and also persons with disabilities. This is only what we have done under the local employment partnership with 62 accredited training providers, varying from vocational technical schools, universities, private companies, and local development agencies, 157 certified new training programs. And what's next for the country from the European Commission side is this growth plan for the reform and growth facility and the reform agenda for Bosnia and Herzegovina, whereas the labor market reforms are actually integral part of the area for human capital development and retention, and there are 9 reform steps to be completed. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, that was excellent. And what's interesting, I think, is that we look at Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the starting point may be very, very different. But many of the challenges, many of the solutions are fairly similar, linking training, engaging with education, engaging with young people, engaging with marginalized groups. And I think it's important also to bear in mind how quickly the pathway from pre-accession to post-accession can transform public employment services. We're lucky enough to have a number of directors general from the Baltic states, which I'm a particular fan of. So Lithuania, Latvia in particular, I think have done very, very well. Estonia too. I mean, these are now top-ranking public employment services in the world, and they have done this journey in around 20 years. So when I look at Bosnia and Herzegovina, I'm saying that actually in 20 years' time, I would love to be here and would love to be applauding their progress in making things work that 20 years ago would have seemed impossible in the Baltic states. So I'm going to start, if I may, with you, Ljiljana, and ask you, what do you think is the biggest success story for Bosnia and Herzegovina regarding the support that you've got from the European Union?
Yes, I think. Yes. I think, like the main change is also this institutional change and the human change, which is the hardest change to achieve. Really, because when we first started, there was a lot of reluctancy and resistances we've seen in the research as well from the institutions, and I mean from the personal point of view, from the people, very individual. People do not accept changes easily. So this was the hardest. Yes, everybody were talking about this, so this was the hardest thing. So like for me to see this change after certain years and implementation of programs and also adjustment of our approach to the institutions and how we deliver our assistance, I think that would be the huge change. I would really like them to continue in this path, because when we started, for example, with this motivational, just it could be a curiosity with these motivational trainings and support. I mean, even colleagues from the public employment services, they said, we need also motivational support, because nobody has, like provided the proper trainings for them, motivated them to perform, let alone them to motivate somebody, like to get activated into the labor market, especially when we are talking about the vulnerable groups, where you have to pay really special attention, especially women, in very complex, let's say, social circumstances, persons with disability, Roma, they are a very specific category, they really require a full attention.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really good point, because I think we heard yesterday that we take for granted that our coaches and leaders have the necessary skills and competencies. I think it was Sven from UWV Werkbedrijf in the Netherlands that talked about the fact that actually they needed training in order to manage the governance and the architecture of their ecosystems and partnerships, and I think the same absolutely goes for our coaches as well. No, thank you very much for that. Gabriela, if I may come to you, Spain is one of the archetypal decentralized countries, and I think that we see from there that one of the charges is that kind of postcode lottery, if I can put it that way, in terms of standards of support. The reforms are obviously trying to change that now. Where do you see the biggest successes so far? Because I know the reforms are still fairly fresh. Where do you think you see most progress in managing this transformation, of building the partnerships and the skills needed by your coaches in this newer environment?
Well, thanks for your question, Anton. Let's see. This is, I think it's a never-ending transformation process to begin with. I mean, the decentralization and the transfer of competences started long ago, and we're still reassuring that we have national standards and those cooperation instruments that make very respectful choices where all regions are taken into account, and where we do not try to bring back centralization, so to speak, but rather continue with this cooperation, right? And that's well, we're very proud in the network, because we have a network that's alive and kicking, and where different levels of government are really speaking to each other on a technical basis. So that's where we think the magic is occurring, because there's so much compartmentalization sometimes between different ministries, only at the national level, or I mean, think about then taking the regional and the national level. So the fact that the network makes us work together on a voluntary basis as well. This is also very important to bear in mind, that regions are there because they want to be, not independent from the political colors, right? So I think that's where we have a very strong driving force to nurture and take care of our counsellors independently of the region. We do have we want to set national standards. We want to reach out, but we don't want to compromise the local diversity either, and their local needs. So yeah, basically, I think, did I answer your question?
You did, absolutely.
Because I can start just.
Yeah, and I think there are some lessons there for countries that are also decentralized or thinking of decentralizing. We see countries like Denmark, for example, which is highly decentralized, beginning to rethink how it trains its advisors, because in many respects they become perhaps a little too local and too fragmented. And we see that in other countries as well. So I think that's really helpful. I think the other point there is around how you are engaging with other organizations and NGOs and trying to bring them in on the total quality standards and the developments as well, which looks really good. Marc, if I may come to you, I think one of the things that struck me as most impressive there was that you talked about your coaches in terms of navigators. I think that historically public employment service and other coaches have tended to be fairly transactional because I think those are the systems that have been designed. What would you see as the biggest challenge for an individual coach navigating as opposed to having fairly set structures and fairly set systems to go through in the current labour market with all its diversity?
So navigating in the customer or the client journey is quite complex again. And I think one crucial element is intercultural training, which we do a lot. For example, simple things. We had a really, really qualified Phil D from Russia some years ago. He was setting up atomic plants in Russia, and they have a lot of atomic plants, as you know. And he had so many applications. And with every application, he was invited for an interview because his CV was simply perfect for Siemens and all the other energy companies. But after the interview, he went never to the second round. And why? Because he was not behaving appropriate in the German way, how you behave in an interview situation. And what was the reason? He was a Russian man, so he was absolutely dominant in an interview situation. He was dominating the room and he was dominating the table, so that the German managing director was thinking immediately, this man is going to take my job over. And then it was over. Yeah? And then we trained him, be a bit more modest, don't be too aggressive, don't talk too much about you, talk more about the company. And then he had 3 interviews after our training, and he could have made a choice of these 3 companies because every of this company would have selected him just due to a changed intercultural behavior. So that's just one example. And then these people, you know, they have a lot of health issues, so you need to tackle that as well, depression. Or they need to go out of toxic relationships. You need to counsel women, leave your husband if he's not good for your health. Childcare is a big topic, to get appropriate childcare. Because where's the point when you work all the time and your children are not where you know you can trust they are taken care of in a good way?
Is it right that you have creches in some of your offices where you deal with lone parents?
Yes, so lone parents is quite a big issue. As you know, in many European cities, every second household is one person. Many cities, in Germany, for example, Munich, every second household is lived just by one person. And single parents is a big issue too. So what we do, we try to organize adequate childcare so that we allow women to participate again in the labor market actively.
Great. No, thank you very much. I think we can try to open up the questioning, open up the floor to other questions if this all works. Great. It all seems to be coming up, and we've got that as well. So thank you very much for these contributions. So one for you, Gabriela. Are you ready? How are the staff in the Spanish Public Employment Service trained and qualified? Is there a standard across the country?
That's a tricky question because each regional public service has its own standards, so to speak, and I mean they do their recruitment in their own way. So there's not a specific training that you need usually, but it can involve different professions, especially from the social sector. So that's as far as I can answer that question, really, because in this sense it is very decentralized. Yep. It's up to each region, but of course it will be people that are in that field of knowledge from the social sciences. So yeah, I am a social worker, for example. Some of my colleagues are psychologists, but there are other professions that could do the orientation field work as well.
Okay. And I think this links back to the point that Marc made about what we do, whether we have a skills-first based approach or whether we have a diploma-based approach. And I think that's particularly important as we go forward. Germany, for example, the German Public Employment Service will be suffering very serious counselling shortages over the next 5 to 10 years as people, as counsellors and coaches retire in large numbers. So there needs to be some fundamental thinking about how do we do that. I think also we are talking to employers about a skills-first approach. Maybe we should be perhaps thinking about that ourselves. Marc, a question for you. Could you reflect on the role of employers in reintegration? And how does the new technology for your services work with them as well? How do you integrate the new technology for your employer engagement?
Yeah, we have this already, so I think employer are really important part in this magic triangle, counselors, employers, and client, because obviously without employers, the whole system will not be working. In Germany, currently, the biggest employer is the public service. That's one of the rare sectors who keeps on employing, while the industry is pretty much down these days. So I would emphasize the importance of having specialized people, colleagues in your teams, just liaising with the employers, with the associations and with the direct employers. And in Germany, for example, 80% of the jobs are in small or medium-term companies. So these are companies with less than 10 employees, but they offer the most vacancies. So not only contact the big companies, not only BMW or Siemens or Sparkasse or what you have, but really focus on the small entities. There is where the labor is required, and it's easier to get in because in all the big companies, AI is driving the recruitment process, and if you don't know the rules of the AI bots, then you're directly selected off.
So you are training your coaches to be able to advise your customers to be able to navigate the AI arms race, if you like, the AI recruitment arms race.
Exactly, and sometimes we go out with our clients to employers just to support them, just to be with them, just to help them to be more confident. So the outreach of the work we do is quite intensive too. And sometimes we go with them to companies, to employers, and to public services just to fill in forms. You don't know how complicated it is to fill in a German form when you're not German. Even for me, my tax declaration, it's a horror, you know, just to understand it. But when you're not German and you don't speak German, these forms are really, really, literally impossible to fill in.
Great.
So daily support with the daily task is quite important.
Yeah. And Ljiljana, in terms of digital support, some of the new tools that we have been hearing about over the last 2 days, what progress has been made in Bosnia and Herzegovina?
We have a separate assistance for the digitalization process in general, but what we do under the labor markets approach is actually we provide these digital tools which could be available at the institutional websites, however, websites or whatever, you know, like networks. But this is a bit, you know, this would require more focused and a higher scale assistance to develop these digital systems in the institutions properly. What would be also important for us is to have this interoperability, but so far there have been some stalemate in achieving this interoperability of data due to highly decentralized competencies. So, but yes, this is what we are trying to achieve and trying to find a common grounds for the institutions to agree how to make these data available and also have to use all the available tools in improvement of their services.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people would sympathize with the interoperability challenge, and we heard about that yesterday, I think, in particular from our colleague from Le Forum in Brussels, and actually, sorry, in Brussels. I think one of the key issues that public employment services face is around how they bring together a lot of the digital sources. In reality, the bigger the ecosystem, the more likely it is that you will get a wider source of data. And we know that AI and machine learning feed off data. So the bigger the ecosystem, the more likely it is that if you can feed into what your partners and your other stakeholders are doing, the more likely you are to have really good granular evidence to support building pathways for customers there. Gabriela, if I can come back to you, another question from the audience there. From a Spanish perspective, what does a balance between heart and human look like, between digital and human? What would be the best balance, or what balance is Spain trying to achieve there?
There is definitely a human factor that is, from what the data we've been collecting for this module in a standardized counseling protocol, as we call it, the model. There is a very significant amount of counselors, I think, that said that the human part is very important, and that that balance with the AI is still, I mean, I think we're in the discovery phase, maybe, of finding that balance. So I would say that right now it's more awareness of the AI not being able to substitute the human touch. And I think that already in itself it speaks for that balance, actually. There's not much more to say. If you have the awareness that AI cannot replace the human touch, then we have a balance, in my opinion.
Marc kind of touched on that with bots. I think a lot of organizations now have agents, and I think it's worth looking as well from a public employment perspective what other sectors are doing. Health in particular is really using AI and bots to create pathways, to re-diagnose, to create connections across different treatments. Education too is making huge progress in using AI and bots, good or bad, in order to drive progress, particularly tailored progress for less able students there. I see we have a question here on looking ahead for over the next 5 years. What will the biggest changes for PES delivery be? I think, if you will forgive me, whoever wrote that, because it is anonymous, we'll probably save that for the next session, which will be looking at AI and digitalization in more detail. Very quickly, I will just give our panelists a quick one-line wrap-up for them. What will be the biggest challenge in the next 5 years in their context for them? And if I can start with you, Ljiljana, in Bosnia.
Yes, to continue this positive change that is happening, for example, now in the country, and to transform institutions so that they can basically deliver, because they already have a sufficient financial resources by themselves. They just need to be properly maybe redirected, used, and maybe just extend these partnerships beside what we do at the program level. So it would be good really to embed these good experiences, how we cooperate with employers, with education institutions, also with the specialized civil society organizations, to help them deliver the active labor market programs.
Brilliant. So same challenges, different context. I'll be back in 20 years and I want to see some success, please. Or else. Okay, Gabriela.
Yes, from our perspective in the network, I think the biggest challenge is to really meet the needs of our counsellors throughout the PES, throughout the whole territories, and to really listen to their needs, to have this network really alive, and because it's built on a voluntary basis, so we don't want to lose it at any time, and really have just more and more progress, because there will always be new challenges coming up, and we need to be able to face those challenges, listening to the pest counselors themselves.
Yeah, and I would agree, and I think a bottom-up approach is empowering coaches to be able to continuously improve, as I think Marc also mentioned, is absolutely the right way to go. Marc, counselling excellence partnerships, what's going to be big for you in Germany and Switzerland?
So when I was flying in, I was reading an article. I'm a sort of Instagram junkie sometimes. And this article said the generations born now, 25 and afterwards, in 20 years, the labor market and the professions will be highly individualized. There will be no more classical job titles. And all the relevance of diplomas, degrees, university will be more and more less important, because the content is changing so fast. So if you start today studying engineering, in 5 years, the world is completely different. So, and I think that transition in our heads, not in these young generations, that everything we knew and we relied on our careers and how we had been educated, will be completely different. I think that will be a big challenge in all sectors.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much to all of you for your great contributions, and thank you to all of you and to our online audience for your intention and your input as well. A round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you.